I'd like to call this meeting for November 9th, 2020 of the Rockingham County School Board to order. We have need to approve tonight's operating agenda. May I have a motion for that?
We approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Passes 5-0. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to say the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. Please join together for a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comments. We have a sign-up sheet that was at the entrance, and we have Amber Ham. I would like to call on to speak.
My name is Amber Ham, and I'm a parent of 4 children, 3 of them attending Rockingham Public Schools, as an elementary student, middle, and high school students, and then a 4-year-old. I've been part of Rockingham County Schools as a parent for 9 years and plan to be part of Rockingham County Schools for another 13 years. 2 of my children have IEPs due to their disabilities, and my other child goes in and out of reading specialist services. As a parent, I see the struggles and frustration that my children have to endure as they try to overcome and deal with the limitations they have been given. These limitations are not something they chose, but is a lifelong battle that they will have to encounter 100% for the rest of their lives. 100% for the rest of their lives. As parents, we make lifelong commitments when we have children or adopt children. Our legal responsibility might end when they turn 18. However, for most parents, and for me, this is a commitment that I have made for the rest of my life. As parents, we support our children and create opportunities for our children to learn and be the best person they can be. Some children need more supports than others, as their abilities and their struggles are different. As parents, it is our responsibility to raise our children to be the best citizen and person they can be. Schools also play a vital role in our children's lives for typically 13 years. For children with disabilities, an IEP can serve a child up to 18 years if the school chooses to open the opportunity for these children. Either way, this is a significant and vital part of a child's life. I believe anyone who works in the school system goes into education due to their love of children. I have met some exceptional educators that have worked with my children. Some of them know my children longer than I have. For those exceptional educators that truly understand my children and have gone above and beyond, I want to say thank you. Thank you for loving my children and understanding them, and maybe even going out on the limb to advocate for my children and their needs. I hope your passion, commitment, and love continues to pass on to other students, and that you may touch their lives like you have touched our lives. I also believe I have met educators that have the ability and the heart to be exceptional educators, but stress, limitation, burnout, supervision, to name a few, have influenced their performance and the ability to do their job. When this occurs, the people that truly suffer are the students, because the students rely on the schools and the educators to help them learn the vital foundations of life. Educators and administrators control the opportunities that their students have in the schools, which is vital to our children's success. The school has the ability to open the doors for opportunities, services, and supports for our children that they may need, especially for those students that are struggling with disabilities, or close the door and limit our children's opportunities for success. This is important, so I'm going to want to repeat this. The schools have the ability to open the doors for opportunities, services, and supports for our children that may be needed, especially for those that struggle with disabilities, or close the door and limit our children's opportunity for success. However, the difference between a parent and an educator is that this commitment and responsibility is not a lifelong commitment for an educator. However, it does have a lifelong effect that could limit the success of our children. Sometimes as adults, we make decisions in which we do not benefit personally, but it is not the best decision, but it is the best decision for our children and students. As adults, we make decisions that might be hard, time-consuming, and even unpleasant. But it is the decision that we make because our children and students will benefit. Is that not true? The ultimate responsibility of the schools and the parents? Is that not true? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As during past meetings, we also made a form available where the public could submit comments, and we received one comment from Olivia Haimani. I ask that you please practice prevention and reconsider starting additional in-person school on November 16th. It is advisable to wait until the end of the semester in January, when we will have a better idea of the impact of on the pandemic from the holidays and winter. COVID numbers are increasing over the entire nation. Public health experts are all urging us to prepare and acknowledge that we are in for a rough winter. It is expected that we will see continued increased COVID cases, spread, and severity as the weather cools. Folks gather over the holidays, we spend more time indoors, and we enter cold, flu, and RSV season. Additionally, widespread testing and quick turnaround is still unavailable. COVID is in our schools, as evidenced by the notifications we receive, yet since there's no testing, we have no idea the extent. Delaying the start of the hybrid model will help support preventing the asymptomatic spread among students and staff that will continue to fuel outbreaks, especially as many, I fear, recklessly gather for the holidays. It will also help prevent the overburdening of our hospital and healthcare system in the coming months as we brace for the predicted surge and management of the first cold, flu, and RSV season with COVID. Then there are the concerns with the hybrid model. COVID is acknowledged as an airborne virus and builds up in indoor spaces like smoke we cannot see. Extra sanitizing and physical distancing does not eliminate the spread in closed spaces, such as a classroom, for extended periods of time. Additionally, we have not been notified of the plan should the schools start up and then need to close again. Will the grading system be reinstated? Then there is the push to assign over 2.5 hours of homework on the 3 days the students are not in school. We do not have the time for this, as both parents in our household work full-time, and we have found additional learning activities for our daughter during those days. We chose the hybrid model so our child could have teachers and classmates she's more familiar with to ease the stress of this school year, trusting that RCPS would protect us by not starting in-person school when the cases were rampant and expected to surge. The timing of going back right before Thanksgiving and Christmas could not be worse. Again, please reconsider starting in-person classes next week and put the health and safety of our students, staff, their families, and our community front of mind. Thank you. And that is the only online comment this time.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening? All right, thank you very much. Now moving into action items, we have minutes to approve. Board members, you've had minutes to review. Highlights? Oh, well, that's true. All right, we need to do highlights by board members. And I'll start on my right with Ms. Lohr. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I guess I want to start with my highlights with my own students. We had parent-teacher conferences this week, or I guess last week. I don't know, I'm so confused with the daylight change. I'm ready for bed now. But I was pretty shocked doing the Zoom interviews with the teachers. I could not believe how many of my, I'm a school board member, right? I know what's going on. I talk to my kids. The teachers come on, they're like, oh, is that what your child looks like? I'm like, child, you haven't been turning on your camera? He's like, no, Mom. Nobody else does. And then talking to another teacher, finding out that they have a big test that is a certification for this class coming up. And that's the reason that they've had so much homework. I was surprised to find that out as well. I know that my one child had been really struggling with the amount of homework there, but it's amazing what you find out when you talk to the teachers, even if you're on the school board, right? So I encourage all the parents, if you didn't take advantage of parent-teacher conferences this past week, please do so, because it's amazing when you get your child and the teacher and you kind of all in the same space, even though it's virtual, it's amazing what you can learn. And I really, really had some eye-opening times with that, and the information I got was so helpful. So I really encourage everybody to do that. I guess my other highlight, I would like to wish Chairman Falk a happy birthday. And unless Charlotte makes us do it, I won't make everybody sing happy birthday. We'll just wish you happy birthday and warm thoughts. Does that sound good to everybody?
Thank you very much.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Dr. McQuilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I would like to start with wishing all the veterans a happy Veterans Day. We would like to recognize you for your service, and I know the Veterans Day will be celebrated officially on Wednesday, but we would like from us to say thank you for everything you have done for us, for our country. My second highlight is the fact that I attended the VSBA Virtual Legislators Conference, and Dr. Scheichel presented during this conference and did a wonderful job. Talked about the state funding issues in relation to the school systems. He also mentioned that we work very closely with our legislators, and that's the way it should be, that the legislators and the schools work together for the ultimate benefit of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Mr. Breeden.
Well, in what seems like a never-ending search for something normal, in today's time, since this does say highlights by board members and not school board highlights, Chase Elliott and the number 9 ZL1 Chevrolet Camaro won the NASCAR Cup Championship. So in my household, things are somewhat back to normal. But on a serious note, I just want to thank everyone for all of your continued hard work under difficult circumstances, and that's everyone, because no one's job has gone unaffected by the things we've been required to do to adjust to the circumstances we've been dealt. So I continue to thank and stand in awe and appreciation of administrators, teachers, bus drivers, everybody on the chain is just doing a tremendous job and giving their best, and for that you have my gratitude.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Ms. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I just have a couple of things that weren't said already. One is that, you know, I am part of at least one of the school's Facebook pages. And I saw what the time the principal and the administration had taken to just figure out a parking and drop-off scenario for next week. And the incredible amount of work that was done to put that together. It's one of our larger elementary schools. It really struck me because I'm sure that administrator, that wasn't done during 8 to 5 hours. That was done after hours and on the weekend to put that together. And my first thought afterwards was, he's put a lot of work into this. I hope everybody gives him the time and the grace to implement it and then make changes that will probably need to occur as a result afterwards, and that he doesn't get bombarded with additional feedback until we get all that worked out. And I have a feeling that's probably how the week's going to go next week. And I think Mr. Breeden talked a couple weeks ago about patience and grace. And I would encourage our community to continue to show that, particularly for our people at the school level, as we start and we change and we adapt and we pivot again. There's no perfect scenario here. There really isn't. I wish there was, but there's not. And we're taking each curve and bend and then forging a straight path and then taking the next curve and bend. And I think it's just important that we continue to work on all of that together. Every now and then I get a comment about how I don't understand, I don't have children in the school anymore, and you would be surprised how much we do understand. All 5 of us have had children that have gone through the school system at different times, with different backgrounds, with different things that they were involved in, and so we each bring a unique perspective, and there's probably one of us here that's had a similar situation, tackled a similar issue, had a similar joy with our children. And so I just continue to ask for your patience and grace as we continue to take steps in the right direction for Rockingham County. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Cycle.
Thank you, Chairman Falk. Happy birthday, too.
Thank you.
I was going to talk a little bit about the legislators' event, but Dr. McQuilkin has already addressed that. There's another highlight, working with city schools and with VDH. So we've developed a protocol to start a contest in our schools, a mask face covering design contest. So students will be able to design what they think those face masks should look like within obviously some parameters. And then we will make those available. They'll be judged by art teachers initially, and the city is doing the same thing. So we've had a lot of good conversations with the city as well on that. And then also just, I think, when Mr. Breeden asked last time about homework, and again, it came up in the public comment that was submitted online. I had received probably 30 or 40 emails from parents after that was solicited by a grandparent on Facebook, and the responses that came they were very, very thoughtful, right? I'd asked for families to paint that picture of what does that look like in their household, and it's really amazing again when people bring their story to the table and they ask that we work together, then good things happen. So as a result of all that, the Midland High School principals met last week, and we sent out a Zoom recording to our teachers to talk about how we can adjust, because this situation has been incredibly difficult for families, obviously. So now you have students at home where they don't have the environment that they're just so used to from going to school for years, and they can't possibly get the same amount of work done. There's all kinds of distractions. There isn't that structure to the school day. Families, parents have to work. An older student might have to, watch younger siblings. And so we can't just, that's, you can, when you read stories from families, they talk about how the homework is done through the tears, that's not what this should be like. At the same time, teachers, had to reinvent how they go about this. This isn't where we simply can move a lecture online. This is creating really meaningful learning spaces. And, for the teachers, that's really difficult because until you've done something a few times, you really don't always fully know how long it will take someone to complete, for example, an assignment. And it's not the same for everyone anyway. So for teachers, what we wanted to make sure we said was that's not to blame the teachers. This is simply a situation that no one has experienced before. We haven't had this before. And so everyone is simply learning how we now operate in this environment. And we have to be careful that we don't leave students behind when they really are still able to do meaningful work. And so, as a result of that, we decided to just have a philosophical conversation. It was initiated by one of the middle school principals. And what we decided was that if a student is currently failing a class, and there are way more failing grades than we had in the past simply because of the situation, then what we would expect would be for the second half of the semester for students to at least do C-level work. And if a student could complete C-level work for the second half, then we would ensure that student could pass. And so we worked through a number of different arrangements for assigning grades for that first half to have a floor that's meaningful, because students who have zeros, you can't recover from those. And so we've had really good conversations around that as well. Parents have emailed, also about conversations at the elementary level where we're not doing letter grades but descriptive grading. The parent advisory had suggested that years ago, and so there are a lot of things that we're trying to do. And I think as people are patient and are constructive in this process, again, we see that same collaboration we saw, previously, where we look for the critics, but we look for constructive criticism. So, talking about how we can do this, because one thing is certain, and I know everyone who has been on one of the committees for reopening, one thing is certain, that these are not the things that make our life easy, right? By any stretch of the imagination. It makes every day incredibly busy and filled with, conversations that are very difficult. And we know that the best environment for students is in the classroom, but we also know that we are obligated morally to provide a safe environment, emotionally safe, but also physically safe for staff and students. And so those have been some of the really amazing conversations. And so I wanted to, say thanks to our teachers, for working and talking with us about these things, to the administrators and also to the parents, who reached out and just really, they didn't say, how could you do this? They brought their story to the table, and then, were working with us on conversations on how we can improve this. So I think that's the way this works. And again, that also ties back to the legislators, where, again, I can't say it often enough, Delegate Wolt last year worked with us on a bill that ultimately got the governor's support, and that's highly unusual, in the political environment. And so, because we just looked for common ground, and that's the kids, and in this case also, of course, safety. And so when we work together, then, we don't always end up with the solution that we envisioned at the beginning or in the conversation. But again, we also have a school district with 11,000 students and 2,000 plus staff members, and these are, again, difficult conversations, but the constructive criticism is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we need to approve minutes for the October 26th meeting. May I have a motion to that?
I move that we accept the minutes for the October 26th meeting as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Any questions? Hearing none, please cast your vote. The October 26 minutes have been approved unanimously.
Next agenda item is bills. So I recommend paying the invoices and mileage for October as presented in your materials.
We have a recommendation by the superintendent. May I have a motion?
I so move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation regarding the invoices and the mileage.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. May I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, or are there any questions about the bills?
I have just one question, and it's really more of a reminder. I noticed that there was a lot of invoices to Amazon, and I happened to be on my Amazon account and went on over to the Amazon Smile and found that I have raised like $14 for Riffy, and it doesn't cost me anything. So I would like to remind everybody to, and I think Riffy's gotten like almost $500 since August, or I don't know when that was. It was as of that day. But they've gotten, they do get money, so it doesn't have to be Riffy, but there's a lot of our schools do have Amazon Smile accounts, and if ever, I'd just like to remind everybody, when you buy on Amazon, go on over to Amazon Smile, and let's get those donations in. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hearing no more discussion, please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Reed?
Dr. Scheichel, Mr. Falk, members of the board. In your materials, you have a right-of-way agreement for Dominion Power. This is for the installation of a street light at John C. Myers Elementary School at the corner of Turner Avenue and Raider Road. This is part of Broadway's safe walking plan, and they're asking for an easement to be able to put a street light on that corner.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. And I do recommend approval of the Dominion Power right-of-way agreement as presented by Mr. Reed and as you have it in your materials.
We have a recommendation made by the superintendent to approve the Dominion Power right-of-way agreement. May I have a motion to that effect?
I move we accept the superintendent's proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions for Mr. Reed on this issue? Hearing none, please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Information items, Superintendent COVID update.
Chairman Falk, members of the board, and members of the public who are either here or watching this at home. This is simply a brief update again about the data related to the COVID pandemic and our reopening plan. I presented similar information last time. And again, there are a number of different reopening plans in Virginia. And just as Rockingham County is, so are many other school districts as well, reconsidering which of the models to use. So I said last time, fully remote, 68 divisions. And so that's now changing mostly to a system that's similar to what we have. Partially, students are in school, for example, here 4 days a week, and that's also very common for the lowest grade levels. And then blended models for older grade levels, and some in high school, but not everywhere. So again, there's always that distinction between elementary, middle, and high schools based on the likelihood that someone of that age actually could infect someone. And if we look at Rockingham County here, that is not really any different from my last presentation. We are still in that orange zone. So the cases per 100,000 population over 14 days is below 200. There are a few in green, but the vast majority of districts are either in red or in orange. And so our trend actually looked really, really good for a couple of weeks. And when we first talked about, bringing students back, we had said, we asked the community to continue to wear masks whenever possible, to keep the community spread down, because as case numbers go up, it gets more and more difficult to do contact tracing. And then once you, are unable to figure out, who was in contact with whom, then the mitigation, really fails in many cases. And that's, when you then really see that explosive growth. So comparing Rockingham County to other school districts, at the last board meeting, we were at 140. And that has increased, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. We were at 200 and some, back in September, October, and then it went pretty low, all the way down to about 120. And then now it's gone up, and you see in other school districts, again, it can go in either direction. Augusta County has increased. Albemarle is now below 100. You can see Shenandoah County, the city, being above 300 right now. But positivity rate on the right-hand side there, we're a little bit higher. But again, many of the testing events in Rockingham County require someone to have either symptoms or live with someone who tested positive. So that drives up the positivity rate. Now, the 5% that everyone's talking about is really important when you have widespread testing where anyone can show up, and we have some of that. But a lot of the testing events are restricted, and that's automatically a higher percent positivity, typically, because if you already have symptoms, then it's likely, much more likely that you're going to test positive. JMU, just to mention that, I know there have been lots of conversations. JMU's actually done really well with their testing. They test random, they do some random testing, and they've had many days where they didn't have where they tested 1,000 students the other week and didn't have a single case that came back positive out of those 1,000 tests. So that's encouraging as well. And so here are the data trends for the two items that are considered kind of the two most important ones that then are viewed in context of the mitigation strategy. So September 21st, we were at 289, dropped below 200 and then back up. And then again, at the last board meeting, we were at 140, and now we're at 182.2, although a week and a half ago, we were at about 120. The positivity, we're in around 6%, 7% again. That's not really changed dramatically. We made the dashboard available. Anyone who goes to the webpage, you can see the number of cases that we have in the schools. And again, but again, since we opened schools, we really haven't had cases of students infecting other students. So there's plenty of the research out there now that schools are not these super spreader. Very much aware, of who has contact with whom, and to make sure that we don't spread it in the buildings. But it's always important, again, to know that context. So you saw that we went from, 140 to 180, and there was one day, it was a Saturday, I believe, a week and a half ago, and all of a sudden, Rockingham had 35 cases in one day. And so on Monday morning, I immediately contacted Fire and Rescue because, again, I talked to Chief Holloway about the specifics of these cases. And he said, yeah, I was just about to call you because all 35 are at a single assisted living facility. So that's something that we have to know. And so if we look at 140 versus 180, you see, oh, that's 40 higher. Well, you take 35 out that are in one environment that aren't spreading that, in our schools or in the community at large, and now you're 5 higher, right? Which is not that significant. And so we have to keep our eyes on it. There have been days where we had 1 case in the county, 2 cases in the county. There were a few where we had 17, 18 over the last week. And so, again, we will continue to monitor that. But it is important. We can't just look at numbers and colors. It is important to know where those are and how they are spreading. Again, mitigation strategies, physical distancing, consistent use of masks. And this is one that we are enforcing in schools and that we will continue to enforce. And where we find out that they're not worn correctly, we'll reiterate that because it is the ticket to bring more students back to in-person learning. And then, of course, hygiene and then our cleaning and disinfecting protocols. We contact trace with VDH, so I mentioned this last time. But the ventilation I talked about last time, and I have an update, regarding that. So early on, we looked at whether we could have system-wide enhancements just of the HVAC systems with either ionization or ultraviolet light. And number one, that wasn't available in time, one, to receive the Corona relief funds, but also, for the beginning of students returning in larger numbers. And so we looked at mobile air purifiers. Much of the research, I was originally a little bit reluctant to just go with that because it seems like, okay, you go to a store and buy an air purifier, what does that do long term? What do the filters cost, and so on, and is it really top quality? But then research after research, or center after center, Harvard Med, they all mentioned this, mobile air purifiers, because now you can target, for example, the mobile unit. You can target the choir room, where you want to make sure that your air quality is even better, where it's not just talking, in the choir room, and in a mobile unit where you just don't have the same HVAC unit. And as you can imagine, every school district in the country is trying to get mobile air purifiers. And so they weren't really available until Mr. Reed did a presentation to the executive team. And so that's him there with this blue box. And interestingly enough, the same technology is used for abatement in buildings. So when they need to clean the air, these machines aren't as, they don't look as fancy, they are a little bit more industrial. But we were able to order 500 of these air purifiers. And so we looked at what that actually does to air quality. Our existing system, for example, I asked at Montevideo Middle School, what standard rooms dimensions might be. In the research, you find that you should have at least 3 air exchanges per hour. So in a classroom, so 3 times per hour, the air is completely refreshed with fresh air, right? And so our HVAC systems do that. In fact, the classroom dimensions we used at Montevideo, it's almost 4, right? So when you read about air quality in schools, they say 3 is what you should have. Most schools in the United States are about 1.5. So everyone's trying to improve this. A hospital room for a patient has to have a minimum of 4. Many have 6. And so this mobile air purifier, if you run it at full tilt, and that it does get a little noisy at that, but if you were to put that in a classroom at Montevideo, you'd be, I believe, at 7. So it'd be higher than what the patient room at a hospital, needs to have. Even when you run it, slower, or our existing systems come very close, right? So that's not what people picture, right? When they say, oh, but we're stuck in a classroom, the air exchanges, 4 times up to 7 times in 1 hour. And so, again, with these, we will target the locations where we can't achieve it just with the HVAC system. And so we, again, and we also ordered filters for 3 years so that we, again, continue to operate these because there is obviously always a flu season, right? And so if you can now improve air quality during flu season, flu seasons may not be as severe as they sometimes are, especially when the flu vaccine, which doesn't always work because it's based on looking ahead 6 months, where the flu is in the southern hemisphere. It's not always as functional, as effective as other years, right? So if they get the guess correct, then the flu vaccine works, and we don't have as much. But again, these strategies are all helpful in those environments as well. When we first talked about reopening schools, I used countries in Europe, and I always hear about it's all different, and we shouldn't be using the Europeans. They have different environments in classrooms, and all of that is to some extent true. But what we talked about there is when you compared those countries across the globe, really New Zealand, many others, to the United States, what we saw was that those countries had an exponential growth in cases and then an exponential decrease in cases because they shut down, they had nationwide mask mandates at grocery stores much earlier, and so they looked really, really good. And in the US, we saw this first spike. It came down a little bit, and then it went right back up. And so I used those countries to say, when you put these things in place, you see a positive effect. And they reopened schools as a result of that. Now, today, I'm going to, on the right-hand side, show you the charts now for the same 4 countries. So this is Austria, Belgium, France, and Germany since then. And now they are the example of what to be very, very careful about and what not to do, right? So if you look at the top left one, so that's Austria, that spike you see on the left-hand side in the left chart, very left one at the top, where it goes really high and then comes back down. That's that little blip there on the left-hand side. Right, so that's when they had 800 cases. Austria's about the same population as Virginia, and had about 800 cases and they shut down. Right? A couple days ago, they had 7,000 cases in one day. Right? We have about 1,200 in Virginia, sometimes a little more. So not much better in Belgium, not much better in France and Germany. And you look at the US, of course, it's not the same scale necessarily. So in the US, you see there's that first wave, and it went down a little bit, second wave, went down a little more, and then now it's again going up. And when you look at what those countries did, they at first felt like they had done a good job with a short lockdown and mandatory masks and all that. They returned to school, and for months really didn't see anything, and they still don't see much in schools at all. But what they did was they opened concerts again. They opened bars, all the social events where people are close to each other with no masks, and in a concert room, you sometimes do have poor ventilation. And now it's out of control, right? And so when people say this isn't as bad, in the countries where it really almost went back to zero, if we don't pay attention to it until there's either a vaccine or some other easy treatment, we have to be careful. And if we're not, it can go sideways pretty quickly. Right? And it's in country after country, you see this. It's not just in the US, right? This is in other places now as well, where Austria now is on a second lockdown. They haven't closed elementary schools, though, by the way, even with 7,000 cases, because they don't, they're distancing and masks, and that works. And again, in schools, we can enforce that. So we really have to be careful. And so we can't just pretend, oh, it's all going to be okay. Because in those countries now, they're worried about, again, hospitals being overwhelmed and doctors having to triage and decide who lives and who doesn't, right? Because they don't have enough intensive care beds. So what we learned from all that is they did reopen schools, and in many cases they're still open, and they haven't seen impact on community spread. So that's one lesson. Even with the high numbers, schools can reopen. Now, they closed mostly high schools now because, again, the older students are more like adults when it comes to disease spread. But schools can reopen when it's done right without increasing community spread. Also, that the continued use of the mitigation strategies is key. So we can't just say, oh, it's okay to wear a mask every now and then. We basically operate because of asymptomatic spread which doesn't exist for the flu. If you don't have flu symptoms, you're not going to be contagious. But here, you can be. You don't even know you're infected. We have to basically pretend like everyone has it. And that's why we have to wear those masks all the time. Even if we're not sick, we're still preventing it from spreading in case we have it and don't know about it. Right? And the last portion there, right? There's a question on the comment. What would we do if it gets out of hand in Virginia or in the United States? There may be another lockdown. We don't know, right? What the reaction is. Now, for school, that depends. If there are a number of cases in a building, in other school districts, they've shut down some schools for a week and then brought them back. So you don't go all the way back unless it's part of a statewide shutdown of all businesses and organizations. But temporary shutdowns of a building, if there is spread, can certainly happen. And but the more we follow those strategies, the better off we will be. And speaking of the flu, this was in The Economist on September 12th. So the flu always happens in the southern hemisphere first. That's where we then check, what virus is most predominant, and then they built the vaccine from that. In the United States, much of it, travels from South America up, and the southern hemisphere didn't see a flu season. So, some cases, but nothing like they typically see. And the reason for it is because people wear masks, they distance, and they restrict what they do. And so, the flu virus also doesn't spread when you improve your air quality and when you wear your mask and when you distance. And of course, COVID is much more contagious, but that's one of the positive effects of these strategies. And so there's a good chance, if we continue on this path of using mitigation strategies, that the northern hemisphere may also see a very mild or no flu season, because now that there's already the baseline isn't there in the southern hemisphere, there isn't as much traveling anyway. So we'll have to pay attention to it. But for future flu seasons, like I said earlier, these strategies, we're not used to it. But anyone who's ever traveled in Asia or has been at an airport, during the flu season, during the regular flu season every year, we would see travelers from Asia with their face coverings, with the surgical masks, and it's exactly for that reason, right? Not spreading a virus and keeping everyone healthy. And so, this is one of the things we're going to learn from it as well. And hopefully the flu season won't be tough this year, but again, that's what we have to pay attention to. So we will open next Monday unless something, changes drastically, for 2nd to 8th on that AB day. And that allows us to be at 6 feet. It allows us to enforce face masks and bring students and staff back in a safe way. Again, I said last time, there are some school divisions that have lowered that distance because as long as masks are mandatory and are always worn. Again, the World Health Organization uses a 3-foot standard, but again, we'll wait and see. So we're talking to the few school districts that do that, and again, they have lower community spread, so we want to see it there. But masks, certainly no exceptions there. We have some cases where students don't come to school ready to wear the mask, and so we work with them, but ultimately that's the expectation. And it's really, again, if we have to act as if everyone is potentially infected, then not wearing a mask simply puts others at risk. And so we can certainly insist on mandating masks to not put others at risk. It's not a choice about my health. I'm really putting others' health at risk if I don't wear a mask. So that's going to be part of the picture. But again, I think if our schools follow those guidelines and our families help, then again, that will be then the next conversation, right? How can we get further? Now we're also waiting for a vaccine, of course. There's some positive indications, from one of the companies that wasn't part of the White House effort there. They developed on a separate track, and so they're hopeful that, again, mass production, won't get us through this school year, but for future school years, certainly we hope that we're beyond this. So, the health data are still encouraging. Again, in districts that are similar, this has been done successfully, and so that's what we will do. But we will keep our eyes on the data all the time, and we will have to make sure that we don't let our guard down, right? Because then we will see similar curves as they have in other places where they thought they were good, and then masks come down, distance decreases, and here you go. Any questions?
Any questions for the superintendent?
So you talked about we're on track and we're looking good to start school for the 2nd through 8th grade on the AB schedule next Monday.
Yes.
Right. How are we looking with high school students?
Second semester.
We're good for second semester?
I mean, at this point,
At
if, again, at the high school, we have a different obstacle, right? And that is credit classes that are semester long, and making that change middle of the year really changes, you know, what some students may be able to take. And we don't want to have students lose a class halfway through a semester. And so we said from the very beginning, you know, high schools will evaluate at the semester time. That's a good cutting point there. But if November 16th was the beginning of second semester, high schools would go on an AB schedule right now, yeah. So I would certainly say we're on track for that. If the health data remain this way and we don't see community spread, just like I said, you know, that they didn't see it in other places either, where they opened with the strategies, then we should be able to do that second semester. I'm certainly hopeful. Not just hopeful, I mean, you know, at this point, that's what we would do. If it wasn't about, you know, about these other issues, transportation, for example, is another one. You know, a bus driver that doesn't pass the knowledge exam the first time have a 2-month wait, right, before they can retake it. So we're working with legislators and with, you know, even the governor's office potentially to maybe fast track that, right, and have those follow-up exams done quicker, because again, we have the classes. And so that's just other issues, you know, as well. And again, the credits and the classes that are electives, we only have one class. But if those weren't there, right, then we would feel quite comfortable going with an AP schedule at the high school as well.
And back to the lower grades,
Mm-hmm.
we're good with disinfectant for the classroom, number of teachers on board, as far as the ones that don't need to teach with the Home Learning Academy, all that. Are we good?
Yeah, I mean, with the national teacher shortage, we're never in a position where we say, oh yeah, we got all the teachers we need, and you know, it would always be better to not only have funding but also staff, you know, that can jump in when someone is out sick, right? We have many families where someone is at high risk, and so if a teacher's at high risk, right, then they shouldn't be in that classroom. And so there certainly will be cases where we'll not have a staff member, you know, a certified teacher there. That happens every year, right? We try to find subs. It's all going to get a little bit more difficult, but there is nothing right now that would make us think we should not open on November 16th. So there'll be some obstacles, but I mean, thinking about what the last year has been like, you know, obstacles is what we do, and we try to find opportunities, and we deal with the obstacles to the best of our ability. So there have been schools in Virginia, I'll be honest, you know, there have been schools where, you know, if a school has 15 staff members out because they're taking care of someone else who's sick, right? Or they have a child who's not in school because that school's not on that, you know, schedule, then you're gonna run into issues. And so schools have temporarily closed, right? So I'm not saying that's not possible, but we're not going into November 16th saying, well, every day you have to wonder whether we're gonna be open.
So what would that criteria look like for shutting the schools? Are you thinking more some of what our neighbors have done and close 1 or 2 schools, or the whole division, or do we even know because we haven't had it yet?
Well, I think the whole division would close likely if there's a statewide shutdown, right, then everyone goes along with that. But a whole school district closing, that's unlikely, I would say, because again, for the youngest grades, even at much greater disease spread, you can still bring some of the youngest learners back. It's always what leads to a closing in the scenario that you bring up is when you don't have enough staff to have students in the building. So, you know, in a regular environment, I can say, you know what, add 5 more kids to each classroom. Well, right now, we're already going to be at max in every classroom. You can't add kids because that's violating your mitigation strategy. So that can happen if you simply aren't staffed, right? But, we use, every possible sub we have, and we just do what we can to avoid that, right? But can I promise you that, will depend on the flu season too, and other things. So, but we're not sitting here saying, oh, we really are kind of on the fence whether we should bring kids back next Monday. And if I still say it's better to have the kids there with educators and in-person learning, even if at one point there has to be a break for a week, right? It still means the rest of the time the kids are there and they're learning, and a break isn't a break either, right? Kids can go back to what otherwise would be a division-wide model, right? That virtual learning, and if they have to do that for a week, to get staffing back on track, then we'll do that too. Flexibility, in something like this is key, and that's been said from the beginning. If something unforeseen happens, it's no different than a snowstorm where we expect 2 inches and we get 2 feet, right? All of a sudden, it's 2 weeks with nothing there, so we'll have to adjust to that. And so I think, that's just how we live right now, right? It's with always health and safety at the forefront, and education for the students where we can provide it in a safe way, but always being flexible to do something different, at least for the short term.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done, and thanks to your executive team. I know it hasn't been easy, and I really appreciate all the work you've put into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's, the executive team certainly, those 4 have put in an incredible amount of time and still had to do their other work, right? That's normally a full-time job, and then these are just completely different circumstances. But then everyone else at central office and in the schools, right? And there's a lot of stuff that goes on that just we don't usually face, but it doesn't mean we don't do our other work, right? So there are a lot of people who've put in a significant amount of time to get us where we want to be. That's with kids back in the building. Thank you.
Any further questions for the superintendent? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I believe the next item is the financial review.
Yes.
I think that's in your materials.
Board members, you have documentation in that brings us up to speed to where we are in the year as far as expenditure versus budget. We're now to the point for school board questions. I'd like to begin with Dr. McQuilkin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. There has been a lot of thought and listening going on for this plan, the upcoming plan, when we begin the hybrid model next Monday, a week from today. And I would like to thank all the people in the system, the teams, all in each school building, everyone who works together, the food service people, the maintenance crew, the bus drivers, everyone, the classified employees, everybody's working together, and I'd like to express my appreciation.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Just a couple of things that I wanted to comment about. First of all, I think probably while we're continuing to address these issues, we probably want to go back and take a look at some future focus. And so the possibility of us as board members sharing conversation with the superintendent as to whether we would want to retreat maybe in January after we get through the holidays to talk about some of those initiatives that we had in the pipeline that we want to go back and take a look at, and new things. We continue to see growth in this county. There's strong housing numbers and more development that's coming through, and it happens to be surrounding the areas where I'm living, so Dr. Scheichel knows I call him every couple days and say, how many more townhouses there are, how many more apartments there are. And so we're going to have to look at growth again and just kind of set, I think, a little bit of a strategic plan for the next couple of years while also continuing to tackle that. I think it brings some hope to our organization, and it's great to continue to be future focused while we focus on the current issues that we're tackling. The second thing is that I would like to see us do, maybe in addition to our COVID update, maybe we go back to a little bit more of another area in the schools and invite a couple more people to come and make presentations to us. Maybe the Education Foundation, maybe if Boys and Girls Club would like to come and share some conversation with us. Valley Scholars, it'd be great for us to get a little bit of an update of what they're doing. I know that they've been doing some good things based on what I've seen at JMU. And then if there's some areas within here that we want to go ahead and talk about mental health again or some of those other things, and maybe build one of those topics into each of our meetings if we have the space and the time to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Ms. Lohr.
I forgot during the highlights to mention that the FFA had a Federation Forestry contest Wednesday. Thank you. Last Wednesday, and for the first time in quite some time, all county schools participated. So it was really good to be. I know the kids are starved for interaction and for being with their teachers and their classmates. So it was really great to have that opportunity and to see all those kids come out. Also, I saw that Broadway is starting to hold auditions for a musical, so we're getting to that time of year. So there are some great things coming. We just all have to be a little patient and hang on. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Mr. Breeden.
I was doing some reading the other night, and I came across a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that I shared with Dr. Scheichel, and tonight I would like to share it with all of our teachers because I think there's a message in this quote for them. Ms. Roosevelt said, "We do not have to become heroes overnight, just a step at a time, meeting each thing as it comes up, seeing it as not as dreadful as it appears, but discovering that we have the strength to stare it down." So I hope that message can be communicated to our teachers tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Dr. Scheichel.
To Mrs. Reed's comments, we already had talked about providing an update of the mental and behavioral health project. Those are some of the things that over the last year and a half, all the other things that we've talked about fall by the wayside, that we've, put a project in place that has, added significant staff in that area to our schools, and that people at the state level, have recognized. Certainly, the other projects, to be future focused, they're not on hold, and that's what I mean, when I say we still have these conversations. So a couple weeks ago, we attended a first meeting with the Future Focused Schools Collaborative, which is a national organization of districts that want to move in that direction. I think all of you were at the Model Schools Conference when Bill Daggett talked about, his organization's collaboration with the National Superintendents Association, and so we are part of that and looking forward to that work as well, and obviously we'll provide updates. There are some of those items that actually may come into play even this year. So as transportation, can only put 20-some kids on a bus that normally has 70, all of a sudden, many districts are talking about staggered start times, and so those are things that we're looking at as well in terms of for this year, how can we have a number of double runs. And so we're looking, again, nothing's ever off the table. We have to consider every piece, and we'll provide additional updates about that.
Thank you. Board members, we have need to enter into closed meeting. May I have a motion to do so?
I move that the board enter a closed meeting to discuss and consider the following pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711, A1, personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individuals' assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, or resignation.
Been properly moved. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. We are now in closed session. Thank you all very much for attending the meeting. Have a safe trip home.